This week, 2024 campaign trail was on the road in Texas, where independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. met with voters and continued his quest to get on every state's ballot. And from New York City, remarks from potential running mates of presumptive Republican presidential nominee and former President Donald Trump, showing their support during another week of his criminal trial. And from Milwaukee, Vice President Harris, as she met with voters during yet another swing through the Midwest battleground states of Wisconsin and Michigan. But first, a look at the top political headline of the week. President Biden and former President Trump have agreed to two debates, one on June 27th, hosted by CNN, and another on September 10th, hosted by ABC. The agreement by the two candidates means they'll be skipping the dates previously planned by the Nonpartisan Commission on Presidential Debates for September and October of this year. The agreement came after President Biden posted this short video to his social media accounts.
Donald Trump lost two debates to me in 2020, and since then he hadn't shown up for debate. Now he's acting like he wants to debate me again. Well, make my day, pal. I'll even do it twice. So let's pick the dates, Donald. I hear you're free on Wednesdays.
And former President Trump posted this video to his Truth Social account in response.
Hey.
Also making headlines in the past week, the results of the May 14th primaries. In West Virginia, outgoing Governor Jim Justice beat Congressman Alex Mooney to clinch the GOP U.S. Senate nomination. He's now the favorite to win in the general election, with the Cook Political Report with Amy Walter rating the race solid Republican. In the Mountain States gubernatorial race, West Virginia Attorney General Patrick Morrisey beat out two candidates from longtime political families, Moore Capito, son of Senator Shelley Moore Capito, and Chris Miller, son of Congresswoman Carol Miller. He's now the favorite to win against Democrat Steve Williams, who was unopposed in his primary. And in Maryland, Congressman David Trone lost the state's Democratic U.S. Senate primary to Angela Alsobrooks, the Prince George's County executive, who bested him by nearly 13 points, despite him sinking more than $60 million of his own money into the race. Miss Alsobrooks now faces former Maryland Governor Larry Hogan, a Republican, in the general election. Next, some of a conversation from C-SPAN's Washington Journal program on the results of the race and its impact on the battle for control of the Senate.
So there was a very closely watched Democratic primary in Maryland to succeed Ben Cardin. He's the outgoing senator not running for re-election. We saw two major Democratic candidates, Prince George's County Executive Angela Alsobrooks and Western Maryland Congressman David Trone vying for the nomination. Now, what made this race interesting was that Trone spent $62 million of his own money, he's very wealthy, on this race. It's more money than anyone has ever self-funded in a Senate primary in American history. And Alsobrooks spent just a fraction of that on her campaign, and yet when all the votes were tallied, she ended up winning by about 12 points. So quite the stunning result, just looking at the financial picture. On the Republican side, we had Governor Larry Hogan, former Governor Larry Hogan, win the Republican nomination. He'll be their nominee, and he's going to make Maryland, which is traditionally a very blue Democratic state, into a top-tier Senate race come the fall. So Alsobrooks.
So let's go back to the primary on the Democratic side. Why do you think that was? Why, given how much money Trone spent as compared to Ms. Alsobrooks, why do you think she was successful and by 12 points?
I think it's a couple of things, but the underlying factor here is just that you can have all the money in the world, but if voters are not buying what you're selling, it's not going to get you all the way there. And I think ultimately what Trone found out was that he hit a diminishing marginal return on every additional $1 million he put on TV. Everyone already knew who he was. They knew what he was about, and they didn't want to vote for him. Elections are choices, and once Alsobrooks really spun up her operation and voters knew that they had a choice, they felt that they would rather go with her.
Even though, as you were saying, Maryland is very much leans Democratic, why do you think this could be competitive?
Because of Hogan's popularity. We saw him win 2 elections in 2014 and 2018, won very narrowly in 14, but then comparatively a landslide victory in 2018, which if you recall was a good Democratic year nationwide, but in Maryland, Hogan was really able to appeal to independents and Democrats in the state. If you look at his numbers, he is as popular in some cases, maybe not now, but a year ago, he was probably as popular among Democrats as he was among Republicans in Maryland. He has significant support among black voters, which are traditionally Democratic constituency. He has very high numbers among independents, and he brings a lot to the table. Now, that makes him competitive. It doesn't make him the favorite, because we know that even governors who are very popular in their own states, when they try and run for Senate, oftentimes they aren't able to seal the deal.
So let's talk about West Virginia. That has Joe Manchin, Democrat, has announced his retirement. What's happening there? What are you looking at?
This state is crucial to the Senate map because it is by far Republicans' best pickup opportunity. The Senate is split, 51 Democrats, 49 Republicans. If Trump wins the presidency, then all Republicans need is to flip 1 seat in the Senate in order to reclaim majority, that 50-50 split with a vice presidential tie-breaking vote. And right now, if we just look at the map as it is and we move West Virginia from the Democratic column to the Republican column, that's a 50-50 Senate. So Trump is up in the polls. If the election were held today, I think it's pretty clear he would have a very good shot at winning. And Democrats are really on their heels in the Senate. It's going to be very difficult for them to maintain their majority, and it's basically going to be impossible for them to maintain a majority if Trump wins the presidency this fall.
Former President Trump got a big boost in polling last week, with more polls showing he's ahead. One from the New York Times, Philadelphia Inquirer, and Siena College showed the presumptive Republican presidential nominee with leads in 5 of 6 key battleground states. In 2, Georgia and Nevada, his lead was double digits and outside the margin of error. The strong polling has the Trump campaign active in states like New Jersey, where the former president says he now has a chance of winning this year. Next, some of a rally he held in the seaside resort town of Wildwood, New Jersey.
As you can see today, we're expanding the electoral map because we are going to officially play in the state of New Jersey. We're going to win the state of New Jersey. Got a great group of people with us, an incredible group of people. We're also looking really great in the state of Minnesota, which hasn't been won since 1952, and we're leading in the polls. And the state of Virginia, and actually many other states. I don't know, it could be all of them. This guy's so damn bad, it could be all of them. He's so bad, I think we're going to win them all. All across America, millions of people in so-called blue states are joining our movement based on love, intelligence, and a thing called common sense. It's time to set other differences aside and come together, get the job done for America. We're going to make America great again, and we're going to do it fast. And we're going to look at Biden. I'm sure nobody ever saw The Apprentice. That was our big hit. That was a big, powerful hit. But I'm going to look at that guy and I'm going to say, Joe Biden, you're the worst ever. Joe Biden, you're fired. Get out of here. You're fired. Get out of here, Joe. We're going to straighten out our country. We're not going to destroy it. He's destroying it. Think of one thing that's better. You look at the Afghanistan disaster. You look at the border. You look at the economy, the real economy, not the fake economy. Everything they touch turns to what?
The former president was also back for another week in a Manhattan courtroom. But in recent days, he's brought along a series of high-profile entourages, including one counting in its ranks rumored potential vice presidential picks, Governor Doug Burgum of North Dakota, Congressman Byron Donalds of Florida, and entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy.
One thing that we've all known is this was a sham trial, but when you have an opportunity to see it up close and personal, you can see it's actually a scam trial. When you've got a judge that's a donor to Biden, you got prosecutors that are supporters of Biden, and then you've got relatives of the judge that are benefiting financially directly from this trial and that information, and then you've got the star witness is a serial perjurer. Then you have to ask yourself, what is this all about? And I think the only conclusion, of course, is it's election interference and it's tying up the president from being out on the campaign trail.
Where's the crime? There is no crime. The only crime that's happening here is this Democrat judge and the Democrat Party prosecuting their political rival right in the middle of a presidential election. The crime here is that the issues facing our nation are not being addressed by the Democrats, but they want to go after Donald Trump. And there's nothing wrong. There's nothing that has been wrong here. Nothing that has been done poorly by President Trump. The only thing that's being done wrong is by this judge.
This is garbage. That is the best proof that you have that if they're going to get him going or get him coming, it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. This is a sham. This is not the United States of America. This is some third-rate banana republic. If this were happening in another country, we would be laughing at them as a sham democracy. I am ashamed as an American citizen to sit here in a courtroom watching the former leader of the free world, and let's be honest, likely next leader of the free world, sitting with the indignity in this dingy third-rate courtroom with fourth-rate prosecutors and a fifth-rate lawyer on the stand as a witness, who actually is violating attorney-client privilege left and right. Nobody's even talking about that. So this is a shame. Shame on this period in our country's history, but we will get through it and be stronger, because you know who ultimately actually cast the vote on this case? It's not just the jurors in that jury box. It's every one of you at home. It's every American who votes this November to say no to the weaponization of justice. And if you're at home, you may say, you know what, I don't agree with everything Donald Trump's ever said. You know what, I may not agree with some of his policies even though they were great policies for 4 years. But you do agree, whether you are Democrat or Republican or black or white or gay or straight or man or woman, that our justice system should be blind to politics. That regardless of whether your last name is Biden or Trump, regardless of whether you've been a politician or not, you get a fair shake in our own legal system. And when you have a prosecutor who campaigned on the pledge of going after Trump and then keeps his campaign pledge, when you have a judge whose kids are collecting money from Democratic operatives by fundraising off the very trial that judge is presiding over, and then telling the U.S. president that he's subject to a gag order, that he can't talk about it, that is not justice. That is a bastardization of what this country was founded on. And I'm here, and all of us are here as friends of Donald Trump, supporting him.
Vice President Harris made her way once again to the Midwest battlegrounds of Michigan and Wisconsin. Next, some of her visit to an event for entrepreneurs and students in Milwaukee.
I'm great.
What's your name?
Ian. Yes. Nice to meet you.
Are you getting all the information?
I am. Yeah, they're giving me some great
Tell me
info.
why you're here.
So I'm here because I do voter engagement in the state. Yeah, and then I'm a small business owner, so just kind of learning a little bit
Tell me about your business.
Yeah, so what we do is we do creative art, like incubating. And so, so we do like merch designs and do a lot of stuff to help artists and find the way to monetize the passion.
So are you doing like financial literacy and all that? And I know you guys are doing it. It's great CDFI, right? Thank you. Are you familiar with their work?
I just got familiar, yeah.
This is why I'm doing this.
Yeah.
So that entrepreneurs like you can have access to an information about the folks like these two leaders, to make sure that we are getting you everything that you really ought to know. It's our job to make sure you know. about the resources that are available to you. So did you take one of each one of these things?
I got a couple of them. I'm getting more,
and
yes.
You got your pens?
Yes, ma'am.
And they only got money because when she was a senator, she fought for money for
Oh, there
them.
you go.
And now
That's
she's making sure we get the money to them so that money can get to you.
That's how this
Hey,
works.
I appreciate your work.
When I was in the Senate, I helped get $12 billion more into CDFI.
Wow.
And so your CDFI got about $3 million of that $12 billion, and that's the kind of work that we have done so that entrepreneurs like you can benefit. This is this one. I'm going to take the pen.
Yes. You can also have a pen.
I got plenty of pens. I'm good. You want sticky?
You know what? I'll take some.
Take it.
I'll take a photo. Please.
Tell me, I do want to ask you one more question. What are the most frequently asked questions that you guys have had today? Like, what are you finding that people are curious about or unsure about?
I think people are just really curious about the resources. Prior to speaking with this young man, there was a young woman here, and she was just like, you know, I'm a little overwhelmed. I don't know where to start. And so when there are opportunities like this for people to really explore the assets within their community, I think that's very helpful because then you know, like, okay, this is a resource I can go to. And if we can't help you, we'll try our best to connect you with another organization or individual who can provide the most appropriate resources and support.
Are you finding that a lot of people you're interacting with actually did not know of your existence?
Yes, and then we have like this really long name, so they're always like, oh, Northwood, what do you guys do? And it's like we're CDFI, but we're also a CDC, so we do community economic development in a lot of different ways, through business support, but also through like planning for public spaces. So we're just really supported to reinvesting and disinvested communities.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
You are making real this. I have on a national economic opportunity tour. You guys are making it real, and you're making it real by being here.
Thank you so much.
Before you go, can you have a selfie?
Do you want me to just take the picture?
That would be great.
I can take a picture.
I need
Your
that.
mom will like.
Oh my gosh, my parents believe me when I tell them. Everyone get in.
You want to hand your phone?
Come on, there we go.
Everyone get together. Thank you, Secretary. There's a little okay.
Who's taking it?
Right here. First study. And then whenever it's next.
Independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. added a number of states to the roster where he's officially gained ballot access. Those are the 14 states in dark purple on this map. Among them are California and Texas, the nation's two most populous states. Next, some of a rally he held in Texas to celebrate meeting the Lone Star State's ballot petitioning threshold and deadlines.
We had an historic day today in Texas. We handed in almost just under 250,000 signatures. That's more than any presidential candidacy in the history of Texas and in the history of our country. The Texas legislature said, change the rules to your year at the last session to double the number of signatures that needed to be collected because they thought nobody would ever be able to do it. The pundits, you heard them from the beginning of this campaign, were saying it would be impossible for us to get on the ballot. And we got on the ballot in Texas. And if you can get on in Texas, we can get on everywhere. Texas only gave us 45 days to collect 113,000 signatures. We got more than double that. And I was just upstairs talking to the team that was just completing the signature, and they said, we're on our way to New York tonight. Oh, because New York is the next one for us. We have 10 days now to complete. We had 45 days. The two hardest states are New York and Texas. We already got more than we need in New York. The DNC has done everything in their power to stop us, and they'll continue to do that, but we are going to get on the ballot in every single state, and I want to thank all of you who are part of this.
Democratic Senator Bob Casey is trying for his fourth term representing Pennsylvania. Here to talk about the race to try and unseat him is Katie Meyer. She is the government editor and reporter at Spotlight PA. Katie, what's been going on in this race so far this year?
Well, one of the very big things we're seeing already is a lot of money. This is going to be a really expensive race. We knew this going in. The 2022 race John Fetterman and John Fetterman and Mehmet Oz was also very expensive, and so no exception here. What we've seen so far is Casey with really significant support from the Democratic establishment, and McCormick, with some of his own money. He's a wealthy guy, but also with major donations from other wealthy people that have gone to a super PAC that's spending on his behalf. So that is a really significant factor here. Super PAC aside, Casey currently has more on hand in his campaign account, but McCormick has that to fall back on. So we're talking, tens of millions of dollars as of the first quarter of this year. The PAC spending for McCormick has 21 million, and that's not from very many donors. It's several dozen, and most of them don't live in Pennsylvania. A couple do, like Jeff Yass, who's the richest person in Pennsylvania, a big school choice advocate. And then, you've seen Casey, again, Pennsylvania is one of those states that the Senate campaign committees are really focusing on. And so they've committed money to that. Not all of it's on hand yet, but those are some of those financial dynamics you're seeing. And I would say that's one of the really notable factors.
And the primary race this year wasn't terribly exciting on either side, was it?
No, not really. I mean, I think you really saw the fields clearing out for these candidates. Obviously, McCormick had already run in the primary in 2022 against Oz. He had lost, but pretty narrowly. And so I think as far as the GOP establishment was concerned, they seemed to see him as somebody who would be able to mount a good campaign again. And Casey, I mean, you would be, I would say, facing tough odds to run against Bob Casey in Pennsylvania in a Democratic primary. He has a very long history in the state. He's a Scranton guy. His dad was a two-term governor, a popular two-term governor. He, as you said, is running for his fourth term. He's got close ties to Biden. So all of that made for, you're right, a very quiet primary.
And what's been the early strategy from these two candidates?
Yeah, definitely, very different in terms of what they're focusing on. Casey, he's known as sort of a quieter member of the Senate. He's not a really flashy guy. He doesn't go on TV that much. And he's talking about that in his initial ads and his pitch to himself to voters, really stressing that he is a policy guy. He's been part of some major, pretty bipartisan, uncontroversial bills passing. One of his big focuses right now has been consumer protection, and specifically a bill that would allow the FTC to penalize companies for price gouging. And that's something that Biden has talked about. He talked about it during his State of the Union. He called Bob Casey Bobby Casey. And so you see that relationship there. And again, focus on things that he thinks voters are really going to feel good about that aren't going to be controversial. With McCormick, again, he's tied himself to Trump. He's said he supports Trump, and so that's been his approach. Immigration's been a huge thing for him. He's talked a lot about the border, which has resonance, for Republicans in states like Pennsylvania that don't touch the southern border, and also has sort of, in one of his recent ad buys, he was talking about Palestinian immigrants. The Biden administration, the White House, had a proposal that would allow Palestinians in Egypt to immigrate to the U.S. if they have family here. And that was something he really highlighted and kind of, tied Casey to the Biden administration as far as that has gone. Another dynamic I'd have to mention is that, McCormick, he's lived in Connecticut for many years. His career has taken him all over the place. He was more recently the CEO of Bridgewater, which is a hedge fund. All that to say, he's a wealthy guy who for many years did not live in Pennsylvania. And that was a huge issue for him in his last race for U.S. Senate. It's going to be an issue again this year. It already is. He still lives part-time in Connecticut. He's been doing a bus tour around Pennsylvania for like the early part of the race, but he goes back to Connecticut a lot. He has two houses, one in Pittsburgh, one over there. So that's for sure a dynamic here as well.
You mentioned the bus tour that he's doing around Pennsylvania. What other strategies are the campaigns employing to reach out to voters? A lot of advertising?
A lot of advertising. So we're starting to see that. I mean, I mentioned that big super PAC that is supporting McCormick. they haven't even spent they haven't really put a dent into the large amount of money that they have on hand. But they're starting to. You're starting to see those big ad buys. Casey has spent a little bit more money out of his own campaign account so far. And same thing for him, sort of reintroducing himself to voters. In polling so far, what we've seen is that, Casey's name recognition is higher. And so that bus tour is a big part of McCormick's strategy for reintroducing himself, for saying who he is, making sure voters have heard of him. And Casey, again, I think is really his goal is to set himself apart. People usually know the name Casey in Pennsylvania, but making sure they know what he's working on. Democrats are going to be having a hard time. They always do whenever there's a president who doesn't have great approval ratings. Issues like inflation are going to be top of mind. So again, that consumer protection angle is something he's really focused on.
Pennsylvania has long loomed large in the presidential race. What is the interaction between the Senate race and the presidential race in Pennsylvania this year?
I mean, it's one of those things that's a little bit unavoidable. Whatever happens at the top of the ticket, and this is true anywhere, not just Pennsylvania, but whatever happens at the top of the ticket affects what happens down ballot. And so, I think with Casey and with McCormick, they're not trying to really divorce themselves from the candidate at the top of the ticket. And, Casey's case, it would be really hard for him to do that. He and Biden are both from Scranton. They have known each other for many years. Yeah, I think so far in Pennsylvania, we've seen a lot of ads. It's already starting. But, the primary, you mentioned it was quiet for the U.S. Senate race. It was quiet for the presidential race as well. There was the uncommitted movement on the Democratic side that, did see some traction here. But Pennsylvania has a late primary. The fields were well settled by the time it happened. And so we're really still seeing everything kind of kick into motion here. So I would say the major action is still to happen.
Katie Meyer, government editor and reporter at Spotlight PA. Thank you so much for your time and expertise.
Thanks for having me.
One last stop on this week's 2024 campaign trail. In Washington state, Democratic Attorney General Bob Ferguson is considered a top contender in this year's gubernatorial race, partly because of his statewide name recognition. Two other Bob Fergusons also filed to run, but eventually pulled out of the race. Next, details on the three Bobs from Como TV in Seattle.
We have breaking Bob news, so to speak, in just the last hour. Two of those candidates named Bob Ferguson have pulled back their campaigns before the Secretary of State's 5 o'clock withdrawal deadline. That was after Bob Ferguson, the Attorney General, threatened those other Bob Fergusons with a felony if they ran for governor, and that's why they decided to end their unusual campaign. What's in a name?
I've known this Bob Ferguson.
One that's so common. My name's Bob Ferguson. This Bob, the state attorney general, doesn't like the idea that two other Bobs, both also named Ferguson, filed Friday to run for governor and started similar campaign websites.
Robert Arthur Ferguson is from Yakima. The other is from Graham, Washington. Robert Benjamin Ferguson. Their goal is clear: to mislead voters and split my supporters three ways to depress my vote total.
He was flanked by former King County prosecutor Dan Satterberg, who called it a prank and also citing the revised Code of Washington a crime.
This is a Class B felony. A Class B felony has a maximum sentence of 10 years in prison.
Conservative political operative Glenn Morgan, who lives in rural Tenino, took credit publicly for recruiting the other Bobs, who both list this Olympia UPS store as their campaign headquarters. However, the Bob from Graham, a home builder, told Como News he will back out after getting a cease and desist letter from the Bob who is Attorney General.
Because I'm just a little man, I do not have the means to combat this. I served 20 years in the U.S. Army and multiple tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, and who knew the biggest personal threat I would face would be from the Attorney General of the state. With, the harassment and threats that I received from him.
The other Bob in Yakima, who posted a handwritten sign on his door saying he was busy running for governor, has backed out too.
This is a threat to our election system.
The Ferguson in Seattle says this is about more than just a battle of the Bobs.
So I would be the only Bob Ferguson on the ballot.
It's also an issue of protecting the name of a free, clear, and fair election.
A reminder: this program and all of C-SPAN's campaign 2024 coverage can be found online at cspan.org/campaign.